Reflections from Torch Trust, focusing on Christian faith and sight loss.
Hello and a warm welcome to Reflections, the show from Torch Trust that focuses on faith and disability in today's world. I'm your host, Marilyn Baker, and we're so happy you've joined us today. Now, I wonder if you've ever been on a retreat. Perhaps you might have, as studies suggest that retreats of all kinds are growing more popular. Several reports show that internet searches for wellness retreats saw an 81% increase between 2019 and 2020 alone. The pandemic, of course, may have had something to do with that, but today we're exploring spiritual retreats. A spiritual retreat is a break from normal life, a time to meet with God and to rest. We're joined now by author and retreat leader Michael Mitton, who spoke with our reporter Suzie James.
So Michael, I know that you are an Anglican priest and also an author. So it's wonderful to have you joining us this morning. Can you just tell us a little bit about your own faith journey? How did you come to take on this role in the clergy? What led you to that?
Thank you, Susie. Well, it's that could be a very long story, as I've lived a few years now. But some people may well remember that there was a very famous evangelist called Billy Graham who came to this country in the 1960s onwards, or 50s onwards, I think. But it was in the 60s that I went as a child to a meeting in London, and that made a really big impact on me. And I think I would mark that as a very important moment in my own faith journey. Typical of teenage years, I kind of came and went in my faith a fair bit. And towards the end of my teens, I went to another conference, this time in Oxford, where I think my faith was very much secured. It was also the beginning of a call, actually, to ordained ministry. And therefore that influenced my choice of university degree. And I chose to study theology at Exeter University. And those studies as well, I think, grounded my faith even more. And then went on to theological college training in Nottingham and got ordained in my mid-20s.
Fantastic. So Torch obviously got in touch with you and we've invited you to come and speak for us at a conference in October. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you're going to be sharing? I think the theme is encountering Jesus. What can people expect?
Well, very much I hope they can expect to encounter Jesus. And that's what I shall be praying for very much. It's a great title. I think that was one that was suggested from you, and I think it's a theme that you are looking at the Torch Trust. And it's the most important thing, really. You know, Christians are not people who just go to church or who follow a set of moral codes or whatever. Christians are people who have a personal relationship with Christ, and that's where it all starts from, and that's where it all develops from. So really the most significant books, I suppose, in the Bible for that relationship with Jesus is going to the Gospels. And I will be looking at some of the Gospel stories and looking at how some of those first century people encountered Jesus. And, you know, although 2,000 years is a long time and so much development since then, the people, the men, women, and children who encountered Jesus in many ways were not too different to you and I. And I'll be wanting to think about them as kind of normal human beings, some of them very poor, some of them religious professionals, some politically powerful, people of all different stations of life. Some had really had tough lives, some had easier lives, but all of them came across Jesus one way or another, as recorded in the stories of the Gospels. And it's fascinating to see how they met him in different kinds of ways.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I've seen a little sneaky preview of your session plan. So you've got encountering Jesus, the teacher, and certainly even in RE lessons, Jesus is studied as a sort of wise man and studied for his teachings. And then you've got perhaps some more confusing things for people in the world, because you talk about Jesus as healer. And then I was interested to see you've talked about Jesus as a social reformer. So what sort of things can we expect from that? Not giving away too much, of course.
Well, I mean, first of all, teacher is fascinating because I think we're accustomed to teaching being of a kind of very didactic approach. And Jesus was. He gave the Sermon on the Mount, he gave some straight teaching. But so much of his teaching was through picture language, through storytelling. He was a brilliant storyteller, and through demonstration, through signs and wonders and so on. And he really, what I loved about Jesus' teaching, which I'll be saying a bit more about, as how he was a teacher who evoked the imagination and gave us power to think for ourselves. So he wasn't the kind of teacher who creates a strong dependency. He's one who empowered us to think for ourselves. So I'll be looking at that a little bit. You touch on social reformer. Well, in many ways, Jesus was offensive to some of the customs and cultures of his time. I suppose a classic example for that would be his meeting with the woman at the well in Samaria, where we see him daring to break social norms and customs by speaking with a woman, which at the time was something that Jewish rabbis, certainly Jewish rabbi men, would not be expected to do. And so that's just one case in point. There are several others where he was not conformed to the kind of strictures of society and the way it worked then, but he was actually presenting the kingdom of God, which was a very different kind of society.
We'll be hearing more from Michael and Suzie very soon, but first I'd like to share an extract from one of Michael's books with you. This is taken from Restoring the Woven Cord, a book which explores Celtic spirituality and the people and places significant in the early centuries of Christianity in the British Isles.
In the middle of the 5th century, during the early days of the Christian mission in Ireland, a girl was born who was to become one of the greatest saints in the Celtic Church. Historical facts about her life are rare, but there are accounts which tell us that her father was Dubtach, the King of Leinster. Her mother was a Christian called Broxiach, who was a bondswoman of the king. Shortly before her child was born, the king sold Broxiach to a Druid priest. So it was that Brigid, also known as Bridget, Bridget, and Bride, was born to a Christian mother in a pagan household. There seems to have been something special about Bridget from her earliest days. She was apparently baptized by Patrick, who no doubt discerned the call of God on her life. Some years later, the king decided to have his daughter back in the palace, but he soon regretted it, because Bridget had the annoying habit of constantly giving away food and goods from the palace to the poor. By the time Bridget was 14, Dubtach could stand it no longer, so he decided to marry her off to a nobleman nearby. She stubbornly refused, and instead opted to become a nun. It seems that the king had no objection to this, and so the young Bridget embarked on a remarkable ministry. Her strong-willed and buoyant personality soon led her to found her own community. She needed to find some land for this, so she appealed to the local chief for a small plot. He refused. Characteristically, Bridget persevered, eventually getting him to agree to give her a piece of land that was no bigger than the size of her cloak. The chief was astonished to find that when Bridget laid her cloak on the grass, it grew until it covered the whole of the Curragh, the grassy plain to the east of Kildare. Here was founded one of the most famous communities in Ireland, and Bridget became the abbess. Kildare was famed for its magical oak trees, which were very special to the Druids. But Bridget's community turned it into a centre where Christ was exalted, and the light of the gospel shone from the community to the pagan world around it. Bridget lit a fire at the centre of the community as a sign of this light. Only women were allowed to tend the fire, and it remained alight for 1,000 years, until the dissolution of the monasteries. Bridget remained based at the same community for the rest of her life, and died around AD 524 at the age of 70. Later her remains were taken to be placed alongside Patrick's in Downpatrick. The people of Ireland have traditionally respected Patrick and Bridget as their two greatest evangelists.
If you enjoyed that snippet from Michael Mitton's book Restoring the Woven Cord, you can get hold of it in accessible formats from Torch Trust if you're registered blind or partially sighted. The book is available to purchase in Braille and Daisy Audio from our online bookshop, or to borrow from our lending library in Braille, Daisy Audio and USB Audio. To find out more, visit torchtrust.org or call us on 01858 438 260. Now back to Michael and Suzie for the second part of our chat about retreats and encountering Jesus.
What would you say to people if they've never been on a kind of Christian retreat before? What's the benefit of investing a couple of days on and being part of a retreat?
Well, I'm a great believer in it, actually, because I go on my own retreats as well. And I know I'm personally somebody who can live quite a busy life, and my mind gets buzzing and I get very preoccupied with the matters to do with my work or what's happening at home and so on. And I do try and have disciplined times with God in the mornings, especially. But I think the value of a retreat is that you really are devoting some of your precious time to saying, this is my time with God now. And I'm going to step away for a day or two and really be determined to make my soul open, beckon my soul open in a way to the Spirit of God to teach me, to inspire me, to renew me, to give me something that will be a wonderful resource to help me with my onward journey. And so it is stepping away from the normal routines and busyness and demands of life and giving yourself some sacred space to saunter, if you like, in the presence of God.
Oh, that sounds really positive. So, Michael, obviously you've been in ministry for many years. Can you think of any examples of working alongside ministering to people who have disabilities? And has that brought any sort of thoughts forward for you about your relationship with God?
I'm not claiming to be an expert in this area. I'm enormously interested in it, and I have certainly had friends who, a close friend has worked here in Derby with people with hearing impairment, and I've learned a lot from him. What I think what I've learned from friends and colleagues who've had disabilities of any kind is the kind of the gifting that seems to emerge. As that, whether it's because of a lack of gifting in one way or another or ability, but certainly the development of intuition and attunements to things and the understanding of life, the perspective of life, is something I've found so valuable because I'm seeing life differently from their perspective. So for me, I fully appreciate it's a very complex area, and I really would not want to ever pretend to be an expert on the subject. How could I be? I think you have to experience that to be such. But I have enormously appreciated the kind of insights, and often spiritual insights, of friends and colleagues who've experienced disability of one kind or another.
Definitely, that's really interesting. I think there's always something that we can learn from each other. That's why he uses that imagery in Paul's letter of the body of Christ, isn't it? It's that richness in diversity.
I had one colleague who was partially sighted, and I was working for an organization which was very much working with charismatic giftings at the time. And I noticed that her prophetic giftings was very different to ours, and really, her seeing, if you like, was of a different quality, which I really appreciated. That's just one example of how charismatic gifts, I think, can operate in the world of disability in a very fascinating and wonderful way.
Oh, that's a really encouraging story. Thank you for sharing. Anything else, Michael, that you would like to say?
Oh, just I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great experience for me. I'm expecting to learn far more than I'll be able to teach, but hopefully from some of what I've learned over life, I'll be able to share something of value with everybody. But looking forward to being with folks, and as I say, looking forward to learning much.
If you've enjoyed hearing our chat with Michael Mitton, you might like to join him at our retreat in October. Becky Davies is here now to tell you how.
We're so excited to be holding our first Torch Together retreat. It's happening over 2 days, on Monday the 9th and Tuesday the 10th of October, and it's at Torch House in Market Harbour in Leicestershire. Guests are invited to join us from 10:30 on the Monday for tea and coffee, and the main programme will start at 11. The Monday session should finish by 5 p.m. Tuesday will run from 9 a.m. and we will finish by 3 p.m. Lunch and refreshments are provided both days, but guests will need to find their own accommodation, as well as breakfast and evening meals. There are plenty of places to stay and eat in the Market Harbour area. The retreat is going to be an opportunity to relax, refresh, and enjoy some spiritual nourishment. We have Michael Mitton coming to lead the 2 days. Michael is an Anglican priest and Canon Emeritus of Derby Cathedral. He's also the author of a number of books, both non-fiction and fiction, and he currently works as a spiritual director, writer, and speaker. The theme of the retreat is Encountering Jesus. So if you're intrigued or would like to know more or would like to book a place, then please ring Client Services on 01858 438 260 or email info@torchtrust.org. It should be a really wonderful couple of days with time to worship, pray, and spend time in God's presence. So I'd really encourage you to come and join us.
Thank you, Becky. And remember, for anything to do with Torch, including our library and bookshop, our fellowship groups and our holiday programme, just give us a call on 01858 438 260. That's 01858 438 260, or you can email info@torchtrust.org. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram too by searching for Torch Trust. Until next week, from me, Marilyn and everyone on the Reflections team, goodbye and God bless.
You've been listening to Reflections from Torch Trust.